Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be replenishing this channel with another CTMU video since it's been quite a while since I've made a video about the CTMU. This channel has been quite CTMU deprived, and I know a lot of you guys are frustrated with that because, there's a CTMU centric channel. That's kind of what you subscribe for, so I'm going to give you guys what you're supposed to be expecting. Alright? Today, I'm going to be responding to the anti-CTMUs in quite a different of a way. Okay, the way in which I'm going to respond to the criticisms against the CTMU today is going to be a little bit different because usually I take a quite radical approach. I take a very offensive approach in so far as interrogation of the opposition is concerned. So when somebody says, hey, the CTMU has no substance, the CTMU is hogwash, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just pulling shit out of your ass, and so is Chris Langan, and all that is bullshit, and you guys are frauds and whatnot, and you're just having a major autism attack all the time without having any clue what they're talking about. And then I tell them that they don't have any clue what they're talking about by saying, or asking them questions belligerently. Say, well, hey, you wouldn't even be able to tell me what a single principle within the CTMU is. Can you name me a single principle within the CTMU? Can you tell me a single thing that is wrong in the CTMU with a logical syllogism, right? You wouldn't even be able to tell me what the title of the CTMU. Like, these are ways that are effective in debate. But in a presentation and in the capacity that I want to represent the CTMU in the most effective way that I can possibly do so, such that the content of the CTMU is explanatory medium. It's not actually emitted, but rather it is transmitted. I'm going to explain the skeleton of the CTMU paradigm, and I'm going to do that in opposition to the paradigm from which the people that are in opposition to the CTMU operate in, and that is this kind of scientism philosophy. So, what is the structure and model of scientism? What is the structure and model, the skeletal structure of the CTMU paradigm philosophically, and how do they differ? This explanation that is going to give us a highlighting of what the differences are between these two models is going to be an illumination as to what the CTMU could possibly entail in difference to this empiricist notion, or this fundamentally empiricist notion or understanding of reality as purely being predicated upon scientific methodology and empiricism. So, scientism and the scientific method itself is a discrete model. That's going to be the primary difference, is that the CTMU is a continuum model, right? And the scientific method just means that it's predicated upon logical justification and logical syntax, and that being an extension of logical syntax in an empirical capacity, right? Connecting the syntax of the logic and the directive capacity with empirical investigation. That's what science is. That's what the scientific methodology is. That's what it is produced by logic, and then application of logic to the sensual logics that we have. Because I do believe that our sensual organs and the way that we perceive reality in the sensual capacity is fundamentally going to be reducible to that of a logic, or like a binary form. Okay, so that's all that the scientific method is going to investigate, or that rather an empirical method of understanding reality is going to investigate this on purely the basis of sensuality and um, means of empirical observation through the means by which we can perceive reality, such as the senses and measurement in a very superficial way. That's what reality is encapsulated by. That's the empiricist notion, and the scientific methodology is another derivation of that, so we can actually accurately reproduce effects that we see empirically. And this is a discrete model. So when scientists talk about something representing the fundamental nature of reality, which a lot of them don't do, but some do, and when scientists just talk about referring to something in reality, what they're actually doing is they're engaging in the description, the passive description of a discrete model. What that means is that the model of reality itself is built step by step, right? It's not on a continuum, right? One step does not follow from the other. They're not related to one another. They don't necessarily have to be related to one another in order for one of the steps to be descriptive of reality. And so within that is a fundamental fallacy. It's like, well, how do you know one of the steps isn't false, right? You would only be able to do that by reference of a step that is ultimately going to be the derivation process of anything that could possibly be true or false, right? And this is what philosophy is for. This is what a fundamental predication of reality insofar as your cognition of the real world around you, the noumena, as Kant would put it, or rather, sorry, the phenomena, as Kant would put it, right, is going to be predicated upon. Otherwise, if you don't have that continuum model, you wouldn't be able to actually say, you wouldn't actually be able to point to a mechanism in reality and say, this is descriptive of reality. You would just say that this is a step within an arbitrary paradigm that we have designated based on arbitrary rules of inference, based on arbitrary rules of what we consider to be adequate for our categorization of something to be descriptive of reality. But again, all of it is just exactly that, arbitrary. It's not necessarily descriptive of the reality that is actually being described. The domain of description isn't actually being identified in any absolute way, right? You have 2 points, and this point are said to be in reference to the same thing, right? They say either it's approaching the same thing. Like for example, if we make it analogous to a line, let's say we have two lines. Let's say that two lines are approaching the same point, right? But we don't actually we don't actually know how line X delineated. We don't know the derivatives of the line. We don't know the slopes of the line. We don't know how they function. We don't know what function they are modeled by. We don't know how they operate. We don't know like, and we also don't know anything about the coordinate itself, right? Like if you don't know anything about the line and how it functions, how would you be able to tell that it is approaching the same uh, point as the other line that you're talking about? And so this is a fundamental misconception. That's a bad, it's not a well articulated analogy, but you get the point. The point is that a discrete model, insofar as saying something is truly descriptive of reality, insofar as understanding what reality is never going to be sufficient, right? It's going to be supplementary. It's going to be necessary insofar as a continuum model is concerned, right? It's going to be necessarily derivative from a continuum model, and it's going to be supplementary to a continuum model, but it's never going to be vice versa, right? A discrete model is going to negate the idea that a continuum model is necessarily going to be fundamental, or it necessarily has to be fundamental, which is wrong. So the CTMU is a continuum model. Now, what does that mean? It means, for example, let me just try another bad point line analogy, okay? You can divide the space between 2 points infinitesimally. My pronunciation of that term is quite bad, but you can do that, and there still wouldn't be any contradiction because there's a continuum, right? And insofar as a philosophy that is predicated upon a continuum model is concerned, and you have things outside of the CTMU that are also continuum models, it's not just the CTMU, that's not the proclamation that is being made. They're expressed as and manifested as the intentionality of that which is needed to be a continuum model in order for it to be descriptive of reality. We have things like Hegel's philosophy. We have things like, Kant's philosophy. They would both um, it would suffice to both of them, and it would not be in it would not be contrary to their logical understanding or their paradigms to say, well, these are continuum models within their own interpretation of their models, because that's what they are designed to be. That's what those philosophies are designed to be. In the same way, the CTMU is designed to be like that. Okay, meaning any point, any reference point in the let's say in a prop, for example, if you have a proposition that is derivative from a set of axioms, any proposition is ultimately going to be referential to that axiom, and that axiom is going to be referential to something else. There's going to be a circular loop that is self-justified, okay? Because it's not predicated upon something arbitrary, but rather it is predicated upon the very system upon which logic itself is predicated. And that's what is called the metaformal system. And that is what we're going to discuss in further installments and in further videos. But the point is that the structure of the CTMU is such that it excludes, it emits any point of discontinuity between logical propositions being descriptive of the same reality. Okay? Insofar as there exists the idea of any two logical points being completely unrelated, that is emitted within the confines of the framework of the CTMU. And the reason for that being is because we have, for example, a concept like syndiphonesis. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that concept, difference in sameness, right? This is another manifestation of the continuum model skeleton of the CTMU structure, is that you have two objects, or you have two things that you could possibly conceptualize, and you would refer to them, right? There would be the reference, and you would not possibly be able to reduce them such that there is a fundamental discrepancy between those things that make them ultimately unrelated to one another. Because they must be necessarily related to one another in order for you to be able to make sense of them, in order for it to be able to be conceptualized. In order for it to be able to be conceptualized, it needs to have a fundamental relation, which itself is explanatory of why these two things must necessarily be similar and how it is that this difference can arise from this fundamental similarity. That's what the continuum model of the CTMU operates and functions like. It operates as that which is the background for any discrepancies that can be found within the world. Any question that you can have that you don't really have an answer to, it says, well, the answer to it must necessarily fall within this model, or otherwise the question itself is either wrong, or the thing that it is, or the thing of which the question is a referent to, is not real or can't possibly be real. Okay, so just to summarize. Discrete model, step by step. They don't have to necessarily be related to one another. They don't necessarily need to have the same foundation or justification for the propositions that are being made to be descriptive of the same reality that these two claims, or these two things, or these two objects, or these two measurements, or whatever it may be, are claimed to be descriptive of the same reality. They don't need to have the same justifications. They don't need to have the same understandings upon which they are predicated. They don't need to have any of these things, but they could still be descriptive of reality independently. I'm sorry, like I'm speaking a little bit too fast because I'm in a rush. I'm trying to get to sleep, but I also want to give you guys the CTMU video. And so in opposition to that, you know, we have the CTMU continuum model, which is like all of the points that are reference to this one thing, reality, must ultimately be related and predicated upon the same foundation in order for them to be sensible, in order for their very instantiation in any linguistically meaningful way to be identified, to actually be intelligible, in order for it to actually mean something. If we say X and Y can be unrelated to each other and still be descriptive of Z, right? The continuum model says no. No, actually, you wouldn't even be able to identify X and Y or Z if they didn't relate to each other in a fundamentally necessary way, or in a necessarily fundamental way. So, in any shape, way, or form you're going to think about reality, it's ultimately going to be reducible. It's ultimately going to be referential to a question or a series of questions that you must ask yourself if you really want to justify it to the maximal possible level of logical justification. And these would be questions pertaining to epistemology and metaphysics. And this would necessitate not a discrete model, because then you would have you would have absences of justification, but you would want justification because you know that it is necessary in order for the propositions to be deemed true. Okay, and so that's what the continuum model says. That's what the continuum model does. Only the CTMU takes it to its fullest extent. And I'm going to go over that, and I'm going to go over how the CTMU does that in future videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this little tidbit. I just wanted to get this kind of nugget out there for you guys because I've deprived you motherfuckers of CTMU videos for quite a while. But yeah, that's it. Stay telic.